0. Yep. Fuck. Yan ang bawas. Like gusto pumego.
Okay, if you were to take a guess, dear.
Alakablam! A mom ate a suspicious chicken burrito from a shady restaurant. This is what happened to her digestive system. DC is a 42-year-old woman presenting to the emergency room with abdominal pain and a massive headache. She tells the admitting nurse that over the last several weeks, she could barely eat bread, rice, and fish oil capsules, but they were the only things she could keep in her stomach. 4 months earlier, DC got a chicken burrito from a new place that had opened up. She was running late for a meeting, so she was eating in her car. The burrito was delicious, and she took a big bite at a stop sign. But as she chewed, something suddenly cracked against a tooth in the back of her mouth. It didn't hurt, but it startled her. She spat out the food and thought that she could feel part of a tooth had chipped off. She wasn't sure how extensive this damage was, but she was panicked. She started digging through the food, frantically trying to find what did this. And then she came across it, a chicken bone piece embedded in the shredded thigh meat from the burrito. But she couldn't find the part of her tooth that had chipped off. It didn't seem like a lot of damage. It didn't hurt. If she went back to the restaurant to accuse them that their food had chipped her tooth, what were they going to do? Thoughts started racing through her mind. She knew that she had to get back to work. The restaurant could just say that she made it up, that she was the one that put the bone there. She didn't want to be confrontational, and because it didn't hurt, it didn't seem like a big deal. She drove back to the office to attend her meeting. DC would notice her tooth, but only when she wanted to, and eventually, she forgot about it. It didn't hurt. But one day, weeks later, she was sitting at her desk and she thought she could feel her heart beating in her gums. Looking in the mirror, she thought like her face was getting swollen. Sometimes, when she'd have a cold drink, that one particular tooth would be ultra-sensitive and really start to hurt, with the pain radiating through her jaw. At the dentist, they found that DC's chipped tooth was infected. Good thing this was caught in time, because bacteria inappropriately growing inside can spill into the blood and start to cause massive problems. The operation turned out fine. She'd have to deal with some post-operative pain, so they wrote her a prescription for it, and because bacteria was involved, they gave her another prescription for antibiotics, and she was on her way. But one of these was going to turn DC's life upside down. Bacteria has the potential to grow uncontrollably, causing infection. So this was the kind of medicine that she needed at this particular point in time, but something was wrong. 2 days after taking the antibiotic by mouth every 6 hours, DC didn't feel right. Normally she'd take mid-afternoon naps, but when she woke up from this one, she experienced a mental fog that she had never felt before, but even worse, a sense of doom shrouded over her. She had had some experience with feeling down throughout her life, but she started having some truly terrible thoughts and feelings that she just couldn't shake. At first, she thought it was the pain medicine, but she stopped the antibiotics early too. She started feeling a little better as time passed, but clearly, something had changed in her body, and she wasn't sure how to feel like she did before the tooth operation. Antibiotics need to be finished in their entirety. If the directions on the bottle says 5 days, you should take it for those 5 days, because if not, the bacteria can grow back, and the bacteria that grows back can be resistant to that antibiotic because those were the survivors who might have had traits that helped them adapt and survive that antibiotic. DC knew this, but the dark and terrible thoughts were simply too much for her to handle, and her tooth and her gums were healing just fine, she thought. This brings us back to the idea of bacteria growing uncontrollably, causing infection. That's one part of the equation. You see, humans coexist with bacteria. In the lining of our gut are trillions of microbes helping us digest food and live our normal lives. They're normal. They're supposed to be there. They create their own community called the gut microbiome. If antibiotics are given when someone has an infection, which is defined as an inappropriate growth of bacteria, then it lends way to the connotation that all bacteria are bad, and that we must get rid of all of them to be in the cleanest condition possible, because that's disease-free. But that line of thinking isn't fully correct. The gut microbiome is essential for normal function. But what does that mean? Well, these trillions of bacteria help do a variety of things, like synthesize vitamins. They metabolize bile, which helps us digest fat and metabolize hormones. Because the microbiome is like a living ecosystem, it can competitively exclude other pathogens trying to come in and take residence in the gut, protecting that person. And more recently, we're starting to understand how extensive a role it plays in helping immunity. For example, traditional chemotherapy used for some malignancies have gone by the wayside since the mid-2010s in favor of immunotherapy, medicines that enable the immune system to recognize and attack the tumor. We found that the presence of certain bacteria in the gut microbiome makes those therapies more effective against the tumors. This strongly suggests that there's a link between the gut microbiome and the immune system, showing just how important this entity is. But if DC is getting antibiotics that are intended to eliminate bacteria from her tooth infection, then it means that some of the bacteria from her gut is going to be incidentally eliminated in the process. That's a trade-off that we need to account for, because the bacteria from that tooth infection could spread throughout her body, putting her in the hospital, and could threaten her life, while the bacteria in her stomach should grow back. But how long would that take? And when that bacteria do grow back, how will we know that the right species are going to be there? Shortly after all of this, on a Monday afternoon, DC had a watery stool. She thought maybe it was the yogurt that she ate in the morning for breakfast, but throughout that afternoon, she kept going to the bathroom. Each time, the movement out was more intense than the one before, and every time she thought she was done, she could feel that there was going to be more on the way, but everything was inconsistent. The next day on Tuesday, she was fine, but on Wednesday, she woke up with what she thought was a fever, and she felt like her entire digestive system was getting ejected into the toilet. Standing up, she felt like her organs were getting dragged out of her body and into the ground. She couldn't even keep down water. She'd take a sip and liquid stool would just gush out her other end. And as she kept getting more and more dehydrated, her head started pounding. It hurt so bad, she couldn't even swallow headache medicine without having a watery stool. Unable to take this, she drives herself to the emergency room. In the hospital, the medical team gave DC fluids and medicines for her headache. Knowing about how her bowel movements have been over the last several days and that she has a fever, it's possible that she has infectious diarrhea. They do a quick test, and they find that she doesn't appear to have a stomach bug, but she still has a fever. So they give her some empiric antibiotics just in case, and some medicine for her headache. And after a few days, she's discharged from the hospital feeling okay, but that would only be for a short time. About a week after that hospital stay, DC started having watery stools again, but this time, something was different. The smell was something that she had never experienced before. It was one of the most awful sensations in her life up to that point, and she didn't want to believe that it was being produced by her. At first, she thought that something was weird about that yogurt that she ate for breakfast again. She looked at the date and found out that it was expired, but this time, the stools were really out of control. She was in the bathroom every hour for days, eating only rice and bread, if she could even keep those going. Back in the emergency room, again, the medical team take a sample of her stool to test, and when the results return, it tells them everything that they need to know about what's happening. Do you remember the gut microbiome? Well, when DC got antibiotics for her tooth infection, the one that she got is known to be a culprit for infectious diarrhea. But when she was in the emergency room the first time, they took a sample of her stool to test, and it said that she didn't have infectious diarrhea. That might have been true at that point in time, but at that hospital stay, they gave her a second, different antibiotic empirically, since she had a fever and those multiple bowel movements. Do you remember those dark thoughts that DC had after she started taking the first course of antibiotics? Well, it's hard to say for sure exactly what happened, but there's research that shows links between the gut microbiome and some psychiatric problems. You see, the gut and the brain are connected by the vagus nerve, and this bidirectional connection means that one will have an impact on the other, which will come back and impact the one. If DC started having symptoms possibly related to mental health after the first antibiotic, antibiotics are known to change gut microbiome composition by eliminating all different kinds of bacteria, then it's possible that some change was taking place back then, and it not only impacted her brain, but also her gut, judging from those uncontrolled loose stools. And given that she suddenly stopped that antibiotic and then went to the hospital afterwards to get a different antibiotic, then we could guess that even more normal gut bacteria was eliminated when they didn't need to be. But then the question is, with all those gone, what bacteria replaces those eliminated? Test results for DC returned, and it tells the medical team that the bacteria Clostridioides difficile, also known as C. diff, is present in her gut. This is the cause of her diarrhea. This is infectious. It can spread all throughout the hospital, infecting other patients who may also be on antibiotics but don't have this particular bacteria growing in their gut yet. As this result is read, DC was put in a private hospital room. She's not allowed to share it with anyone. The toileting facilities are dedicated to her. All medical staff have to gown up and glove up before entering her room, and they must wash their hands after dealing with her because they inevitably will have to physically deal with other patients, people, and objects in the hospital. The thing about C. diff is that it makes and releases toxins that not only cause non-stop watery stools, but also damage to the gut inner lining. They can destroy the cells of the colon, and then the immune system gets triggered to act in the area, causing colitis, itis meaning inflammation. As the days pass, DC sits in her hospital room, suffering with sporadic bowel movements every day. Her problem was first caused by her chipped tooth not getting taken care of early. It became infected, and the antibiotic that she got for that infection started to change everything. Shortly after DC received a second, different antibiotic, the recomposition of bacterial species in her gut microbiome happened, very likely leading to C. diff coming in and taking over. Ironically, the treatment for her at this time is yet another antibiotic, one that has activity against Clostridioides difficile, and in this case, taken by mouth, because the intravenous formulation of that antibiotic wouldn't have the same activity in her gut, because taking it by mouth puts it directly there. If she's dehydrated from all these watery stools and has trouble keeping even water down, then they can replace her fluids intravenously. In the hospital, days later, DC starts to feel better. This third antibiotic appears to be working for her. She's rehydrated and her fever is gone. Several more days pass. She appears well. No more loose stools, no more fever, no more swollen abdomen, as she's discharged and sent home. And everything appears to be okay, but only for a short time. One day, a few weeks later, DC was eating some fruit for breakfast. In the afternoon, she felt a sour stomach, maybe a little heartburn. She wanted to be careful given everything that had happened recently. She tried an over-the-counter medicine that someone had recommended to her, one that would help limit stomach acid. They told her that it might take a couple of days to start working, but that in the end, she would be all good. But a couple days went by, and DC started feeling kind of weird again. One afternoon, she could feel her guts quake and shake. In the bathroom, again, she had a watery stool, and she started to panic here because that smell was so familiar to her. Throughout that day, she had multiple, uncontrollable, loose, watery stools again. In the hospital, again, DC was found to be experiencing a recurring episode of C. diff. Do you remember that concept of antibiotics producing resistant strains of bacteria? Well, it doesn't appear to happen often, but data says maybe 20% of patients with C. diff will get a recurrence. And even worse, sometimes it could be associated with that stomach acid medicine that you took. The thing about antibiotic treatment of Clostridium difficile infection is that misuse of antibiotics were the cause in the first place. And the ones that are used to target C. diff can sometimes cause C. diff. This isn't meant to scare you about antibiotics, but rather demonstrate to you that antibiotics aren't to be taken lightly, because DC can be treated again, and weeks later, the C. diff can come back. And some patients will go through this with no good solutions, suffering every time with bouts of uncontrollably watery stools nonstop that can come and go for years. In fact, much of our current system of medication and prescriptions in the United States was created in part because of antibiotics. In 1928, penicillin was discovered, and its production was scaled up greatly for the world events of the 1940s. At least in the United States before 1950, people could buy almost any medicine that they wanted at a pharmacy and treat themselves without ever seeing any medical personnel. Knowing about DC's case with C. diff, and knowing that antibiotics could, at a minimum, do what they did to her, if not also create ultra-resistant strains of superbacteria that would evade every single treatment modality that we know of today, episodes of self-medication with antibiotics could be potentially catastrophic in more ways than what we're describing here. And so in 1951, the Durham-Humphrey Amendment was enacted by the United States Congress to require there be a class of prescription-only medicines that must be prescribed by a professional who has prescriptive authority, and then the medication on that prescription can be verified, vetted, and dispensed by a professional who has dispensing authority, serving as a check to ensure that the right patient is receiving the right medicine at the right time. It gives authority, produces accountability, and defines liability in the case that something goes wrong. Antibiotics are prescription only. The acid suppression medicine from this latest episode of hers is both over-the-counter and prescription. In DC's case, something did go wrong despite this system. One thing that could have helped is if she wasn't in a position where she was in such a rush to eat her lunch, which led to her cracking her tooth on a suspicious burrito. And one thing that absolutely saves time on food is Factor, who reached out to me and they wanted to talk about their delivery of fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved meals right to your doorstep. They offer delicious
And I ran it so far away, couldn't get away. For the 1000th time, is Iran. Oh, my bad. From the bottom of my capitalist heart, I want you to know I could not give less fucks. Tell him, Florida. You keep fucking around, Iranistan, we gonna head on back over there. My God, he's not even close, but it's worth every second. By the way, UK, 3 boats and a couple of planes, welcome to the party, man. You swinging for the fence, buddy. I'm proud of you. Well, I can't let you Yanks have all the fun. I suppose I do have a legacy. The British Empire's been around for quite a long time. Well, there's been people here for that long, but we kind of aggressively borrowed their land from them and paid them pennies for it. But they helped us out in World War II, so that's we shouldn't get into a battle of oppressors here. I feel like there's a weight on my chest. It's not good. Somebody get me doctor. Heart attack? This is bullshit. I had money on assassination. Hi, Mike. Time to pay up. I swear to God, Australia, if you guys poisoned him and he had a heart attack, I get my money back. Aww. Sad non-Article 5 noises. Sorry, Poland. But on the plus side, chalk one up for American healthcare. Our healthcare is fine. It's much better than America. Who you fucking lying to, dude? Putin's what, 75? Maybe? Have you seen the fucking crypt keepers we're keeping alive in Washington? Hold on a second. America, did you just have another hijacking incident? No? Shit. Everybody count your buildings. Yes, it says here an Alaska Airlines off-duty pilot is being charged with over 80 counts of attempted murder when he attempted to hijack an aircraft. Oh my god, I had no idea that Alaska Airlines hired Taliban. I also see that Private King is now being charged with desertion and child... Oh dear. Yeah, no, I didn't want to say it either. I hope they bury him under the jail. But I do want to go on record stating that you remember when North Korea told everybody in the world that he ran to North Korea because he was being mistreated? I just want to go on record stating that North Korea sides with perverts.
One more thing, Eugene, give me that. If I ever find one of these lying around again, I swear to fucking God, I will stop being so polite. Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish.
But why is there? You see this? I have a dick. I have a. It's not even my stomach. I have a. What is this? I swear.
And I ran.
Replacing a cracked phone screen is expensive, time-consuming, and potentially risky. But what if I told you there was supposedly a revolutionary product that fixes cracks in all types of glass, including phone screens? You may have seen the ads online of this liquid claimed to instantly conceal the cracks in glass, making it look like new again, restoring car windscreens, reading glasses, or phone screens. But does it actually work? I have with me a few different cracked screens to test, everything from an old Nokia to an iPhone and Samsung smartphone. Repairing glass chips using specialized equipment is a real business, at least in the car industry. But can a little tube of resin and a few pieces of plastic achieve a similar result? If you were to click on one of these ads, you'll likely end up on a site like this one, boasting bold claims and a heavy discount for a limited time only. The truth is that discount never runs out, and even that discounted price is well overvalued. But it makes you feel like you're getting a great deal. Of course, they also make sure to select the most expensive option at checkout. This is of course typical of deceptive websites and is illegal, not that any action would ever be taken. The real price of this resin is just $3.88 with free shipping. The advertisement claimed it was worth $56. I purchased one to put it to the test. I have several phones, an iPad, and even a glass window to later try out with this resin. What works and what doesn't. This iPad Pro I purchased online, and I thought the cracks were only in the glass screen protector on top. I was wrong. I'm hoping this will fix the cracks and deep scratches so that I don't have to replace the screen. I think it's fair to be realistic. If your phone looks like one of these two, I don't think any amount of resin is going to help repair the cracks or damage. It's going to be a component replacement. But for a minor crack, I'm really hoping this actually does work. It comes with instructions which are written in poor English, but it sort of gets the point across. But it seems between step 5 and 6, they're showing completely different areas of the glass, as you can see the tape from the previous step. But it's still worth a shot. The first test, a back of an iPhone 12. Replacing the back glass requires a laser cutter or total phone disassembly, so a product like this would be a real game changer. But straight away it's clear that the instant removal is far from a reality, at least for the back of this iPhone. In fact, it's so bad, it's not even worth trying to cure this under UV. So let's instead try this on a plastic front on a Nokia phone. The damaged area is wider than the iPhone's, which should allow the resin to better fill the gap. And it does. While the crack hasn't completely vanished, it's looking better. I'll attach the plastic film to level the liquid out before leaving it to cure under some UV. While that's curing, let's try our next device. The website shows a completely shattered iPhone screen is transformed using just this liquid. It even seems that also puts a screen protector on too. So I picked the same model iPhone with a similar damaged screen. I'll be only applying it to one part so we can see if there's any changes. Nothing drastic happened when applied, so I tried working it around using a blade. Finally, when I applied the plastic film, something did happen. The cracks became less visible. Not gone, but better. We'll have to wait to see how it looks when we clean the residue off. The one device I really want this to work on is this iPad Pro. It's not worth the $300 display replacement cost for such a minor hairline crack. So we'll have to see how this glass repair liquid goes. Is it capable of filling a hairline crack or the scratches on a screen? It's behaving a lot like the iPhone housing, just balling up and not filling the gap. I tried pushing the display to try and remove any air and allow the resin to do its job. This process was described in many advertisements as being quick, easy, and requiring no special tools or equipment. Just when I was losing hope, part of that crack vanished when the plastic film was put over top. I wasn't sure how good my UV light was, so to make sure this cured properly, I left it out in the sun for 30 minutes. When I came back, one piece of plastic film had already been blown away in the wind, but I could continue removing the remainder. And it's gone. Until I break the illusion and let the light reflect off the glass. Now you can see the real result. It's done nothing but leave goop all over the screen. It didn't repair the glass, not even the scratches. Frankly, I think it's just too thin of a crack. A car's windshield is a lot different to a phone and tablet screen. For starters, the glass is a lot thicker and contains a plastic membrane that stops it breaking into large shards. Even the way it cracks is different. The gaps created are much larger. So I don't think any kind of liquid resin is going to fix a phone or tablet screen. But once I've got the iPad cleaned up, you can see it hasn't added any structural rigidity or repaired the device in any way. For the Nokia, this is honestly the best result out of everything. With this plastic screen, it not only managed to fill the crack, but it also made it a little less noticeable. It hasn't completely vanished, but it's much better than it was at the start. And once we've cleaned it off, we can see the difference. So this definitely has some kind of use case, although fixing your shattered iPhone screen isn't one of them. At first, it does appear to have made a difference, but as we remove the excess material, we find the cracks reappearing. This is because the resin is not filling the cracks, but just sitting on top of the glass. I had the idea of using a blade to widen the damage on the display in the hopes the liquid would better fill them, resulting in a better finish. But the truth is, it made no difference. The cracks are still visible when the resin is applied. For my last test, I'll attempt the same fix, not on a smartphone, but a regular old pane of glass. My kitchen window has a tiny crack in the corner, with the broken piece being loose. It's no shock by now the resin didn't hide the crack, but it did actually seal the gap, stopping the little piece from moving, and hopefully any air or moisture from making its way inside the window. So I suppose it does have some kind of a use, but it's not what's claimed online. So this is it, a scam busted. You cannot fix a cracked phone screen and make it look like new using some resin. In some cases it may reduce the visibility of the damage, but it's unlikely. Renowned windshield repair businesses use special tools that vacuum away the air to ensure the resin fills the cracks. This isn't something a cheap kit is going to replace. And the advertisements appear to be fooling people with the use of low quality video, poor lighting, and editing. Just look at this obvious edit. Having tested it, we now know what it's really capable of. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing and this laptop just got a new upgrade allowing you to go from Intel to AMD. It's the same framework laptop that launched in 2021, originally shipping with 11th generation Intel processors. Since then, we've seen upgrade paths to 12th and 13th generation Intel processors. But now it has the ability to jump ship from Intel to AMD Ryzen, giving this laptop more performance than it's seen before. And the upgrade is easier than you think. I've already covered Framework's unparalleled upgradability in the past. However, they've sent over a few new things for us to have a look at. Inside, this laptop is just as we left it from the original video, taking only seconds to open thanks to its easily accessible design. Modular parts, QR code instruction manuals, and color-coded screws are just a few of this laptop's standout features. I will again be using the included screwdriver and spudger combo tool, this being the only tool required for this upgrade. One connector and 3 screws is all it takes to remove the battery, which we'll get out before working on removing the motherboard. There are 4 cables, 2 antenna wires, and a Wi-Fi card to detach before the 5 screws securing the board in place. One of this laptop's drawbacks is the lack of a socketed CPU. The simple fact is they don't make socketed laptop CPUs anymore. The only way to get this functionality would be through the use of a desktop processor, like some gaming laptops use. But that means a thicker laptop with more cooling required and greater power consumption, leading to a heavy laptop with short battery life. So while a soldered on CPU is not perfect, it does allow for the ability to switch to a competitor's processor, something no socket would allow you to do. This board has been made to the same footprint as previous motherboards available for this laptop, making it a drop-in replacement. Other than the obvious processor change, there are some noticeable differences. This includes a different heatsink and the lack of a CMOS battery. Rather, it's been replaced with just a connector, where we can connect an optional battery. I'll get our SSD transferred across before installing some RAM. I had planned on using the RAM from the Intel board, however it doesn't fit, as this AMD version is using newer, faster DDR5 memory, whereas the Intel system was using DDR4. This means we'll have to purchase new memory alongside the motherboard. But don't worry, we have a smart way to reuse our outgoing motherboard and RAM, which we'll look at later. For now, it's time to get this laptop reassembled. It's recommended to replace the Wi-Fi card to an AMD compatible one while performing this upgrade. However, I'll be leaving the Intel Wi-Fi card in place to see what happens. There are known incompatibilities with some new Intel Wi-Fi cards, this one being a Wi-Fi 6E card known as the AX210. I'll get the battery reinstalled before attaching the top case. At this point, I noticed there were 2 lights blinking red, indicating something wasn't quite right. It turns out this is just because the keyboard is lifted up from the computer, which had automatically switched itself on with our new motherboard installed. Booted back into Windows, we can see we now have an AMD Ryzen 7. As for that Wi-Fi card, I did have to reconnect to my Wi-Fi network, but it did work without issue. With new hardware comes new drivers. I'll run Framework's driver installation software and get everything up and running. Now, I'm no performance measuring channel, but I wanted to see if there was any expected increase in performance from the new AMD system. I got a few fail results before settling out at about 10,000 for a multi-core score, a 2,900 point jump from the Intel version. As for graphics, it's an 82% increase. Regardless of your thoughts on the benchmarking software I've used here, I do believe there will be a noticeable performance increase in day-to-day tasks with this new AMD system. Though I will swap in the new Wi-Fi card and get the laptop reassembled. You might have noticed I left the battery attached while doing this. This was done on purpose, as this laptop has been designed so that it can be upgraded while the battery is still attached. This isn't something you should try on anything unless it's advertised. With the screws fastened and the ports reinstalled, the upgrade is complete. But what about the old motherboard and Wi-Fi card? They're still perfectly functional, and while you could sell them, you can now also easily build another computer, thanks to a new motherboard case. To get a usable system, you'll also need a This Amazon Kindle is another roadside find. Like the iPhone 12 Pro Max from a while ago, it was found by my grandfather's friend while out on a bike ride. The screen is broken and displaying its last moments alive. The bezel is badly scratched and the back panel also has a large crack. One thing's for sure, I should go on more bike rides. Seriously, what's going on? You guys just throw your old tech out the window when you're done with it? I've never owned or repaired a Kindle before, so this will be something new. Speaking of new, we need some new parts. I've ordered a new housing, front bezel and display. Finding these was somewhat difficult as of Amazon's horrible naming system. This Kindle's model number shows as either a 6th or 7th generation Kindle, to which there are multiple models for each generation. The model number does tell me it's a Kindle Paperwhite, but both the 2nd and 3rd generation have the same model number. Confused? Me too. Eventually, I figured out this specific Kindle is a 7th generation Paperwhite 3rd gen. I wasn't able to source a Paperwhite 3 housing, so I got one for the Paperwhite 2, which shares the same model number. The only noticeable difference is the logos. The seller assured me it would work without issue on the newer Kindle, but I'll be the judge of that. After a quick heat, I can begin removing the front bezel. While it's glued in place, it doesn't put up much of a fight. Now that we have access to 11 Phillips screws, they can be removed. This will allow us to remove the mid-frame of the device. Attached to that frame is all the internals, including the battery, motherboard and display. There isn't much inside this e-reader, but that's to be expected, though there is some interesting serial and JTAG related things in the bottom right, along with some unpopulated buttons. I'll remove the battery first to ensure no power remains while we detach the display. And with only 3 screws, our 1429 mAh battery comes out with ease. With how simple everything's been so far, you might think the display removal will be just as easy, but that's where you'd be wrong. Once I've detached its 3 flex cables, I can begin prying it out. It's glued in place, which is understandable, but this is no ordinary glue. It's designed to set rock hard, meaning it's unforgiving and not designed to ever be removed. It's similar to that of what Apple's been using to secure its fat glass, that traditionally needs lasers to break down the glue. It was clear early on this screen was not coming out in one piece. Safety glasses and cut-resistant gloves were a must, as glass was flying everywhere. And that's the inside of our e-ink display. A screen technology you've no doubt noticed is a bit different than most screens, as it retains its last image and only changes when power is applied, resulting in low power consumption, making it the ideal display for an ebook reader. The adhesive isn't just around the edges, but under the whole screen. I tried using so much heat I could barely hold it, as well as alcohol in an attempt to soften the adhesive, but it only made a marginal difference.
Pico Chad.
Once the screen had been removed, it was just this last cable at the bottom that was lightly adhered in place. Here's most of that screen. The rest, well, it ended up on the floor for me to stand on. But we can't put our new screen on with the frame looking like this, so it's time to scrape away as much of the old adhesive as I can. I test fit the new display to find it isn't sitting quite flat. There must still be some glass dust stuck to the frame. So I used some sandpaper to smooth it all out.
Wala. Tangay na, maras na.
After a good clean, I think our new display is ready to go in.
Maras naman.
I can't avoid using adhesive to attach the screen, but I'll be using glue that can be removed as it sits rubbery rather than like concrete. Once the glue's been applied, I can position the new e-ink display and press it down into place. The glue will need some time to cure, so I'll put some light weight on top of the screen and leave it to set. Once complete, we can continue reassembling the Kindle. It's clear you're not supposed to replace the display as a single component, but rather the display and its accompanying frame, swapping over the motherboard in the process. This would circumvent the difficulty faced with this repair, however I wasn't able to find a display that comes with a new frame. Sliding the internals into the new housing, I find that it doesn't quite fit, despite being told it was a drop-in replacement. The top section is not seating correctly, so much so I can't fasten the screws. Removing the internals, I can modify this Kindle 6th generation Paperwhite 2 housing with a file to allow for the slightly higher midframe. It's only the left-hand side causing the issues, and once resolved, the frame will fit correctly inside the housing. Another difference is the lack of a screw thread at the top. As such, the frame will be attached with one less screw. With that, we can remove the plastic protective film from the new display before plugging the device in for a test. I never tested the device before all this hard work, so I have no idea if it's going to turn on. Pressing the power button, nothing is happening. It's not till I leave it for a few minutes do we see the battery flat icon, and eventually get the device charged enough to boot. I was expecting something to be on here, but it's been reset. My guess is some kids decided to smash it up and ditch it on the side of the road. But now that we know it works, it's time to get the front bezel installed. I'll attach some new adhesive around the perimeter. I was thinking of using liquid glue here, however I thought it would make a mess and spread over the screen when pressed down, so I resorted to using some tape adhesive. Once applied, the new bezel can be aligned and pressed down into place. And we're done. So this is it, an Amazon Kindle found ditched on the side of the road, restored back into working condition. If you have a Kindle with a broken display, I wouldn't attempt replacing it if you can't source a display that comes with a new frame attached, as the method we undertook to repair this Kindle was almost impossible. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, consider subscribing and check out the phone.
Do men ever think if 70% of divorces are initiated by wives, it means 70% of those marriages, men are failing?
I could not resist, so I had to look it up. From the Office of National Statistics, from a 2019 study, in ever-increasing numbers, we are now at a lesbian divorce rate of 72%. So the top 4 reasons that they are reporting getting divorced is feeling ignored, inequality in the partnership, adultery, and domestic violence.
Are we the baddies?
Yeah, pretty much.
Bruh.
Oh, it is so irritating. It is so irritating that whenever and wherever there is a conversation about feminism or independence or having your own money or wanting a career for yourself, there is always another conversation happening somewhere where women are choosing to be hateful. Will say things like, what was wrong with the women back in the day? I don't know what women were thinking and why they wanted us to work. Why do I have to now have a job? I would have loved to just be in the house with my kids all day, baking and cooking. I would have loved that. So go. So leave. Do your thing. No one's stopping you. Don't blame the economic turmoil on us, honey.
Ano ko yung distortion sa gitna dyan?
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
Sweetie, just so you know, when the ism movement put women into the workforce en masse, that effectively doubled the working population, which also cut wages because, job competition is a thing. But as far as the current economic turmoil goes, the President of the United States and his administration is in charge of US economic policy. And last time I checked, you lovely ladies voted for him, which effectively means that yes, the current economic turmoil is your fault.
This chain of logic is correct, and what is correct is sacred.
What if, and just hear me out for a second, you shut them.
I have nothing against people who enjoy that kind of stuff. Their body, their choice. But in my humble opinion, if a guy enjoys getting his thermal exhaust port stuffed with eggplant, it doesn't matter if the eggplant is real or a silicone facsimile. He absolutely fits the description of that 3-letter word.
No, sir. Men are having a hard right time right now because they have not ever had to be in the practice of weaving social fabric. Social fabric and human connection is actually everything. It is how human beings stay alive. And unfortunately, for most of history, we've had systems and structures that in no way require men to be having the skills of weaving social fabric and or making repairs to that fabric when they make a mistake or hurt someone. And many of the structures that we've had in the past insulate men from facing the consequences of their own actions.
You're kidding, right?
Stop it. Get some help.
So, society has structures in place that insulate men from the consequences of their actions? You mean like, if a man is about to be a father and he doesn't want to be, he can just abort the baby and move on like nothing happened? Or if he gets married and later decides he can do better, he can just get a divorce and get half or more of everything his former spouse owns, plus monthly financial payments for the rest of his life?
Incorrect.
Oh, wait. That's women.
Because human connection is forced through forms of oppression.
I couldn't agree more. Forcing a man to be financially connected to his ex-wife after she divorced him is the very definition of oppression. I'd even go so far as to call it a human rights violation because a man is forced to work for the benefit of another person against his will for the rest of his life without getting any kind of benefit out of it, and if he refuses to do so, he will get punished by the state.
Yep.
And, well, that sounds an awful lot like slavery. But since slavery is illegal under the US Constitution, they just call it alimony.
And that's the bottom line.
Maybe a Chinese passport can't get you anywhere in the world, but a Chinese passport can bring you back from anywhere in the world. A Chinese passport is a passport to the safest place. How would you describe that? It's called the Chinese being awesome. Citizens of the People's Republic of China, when you are in danger overseas, don't give up. Please remember that behind you there is a strong motherland, a strong motherland. The above line was crafted by a famous director in China in the film Wolf Warriors for the Little Pinks. This director's patriotic aura had led him to be a celebrity endorser for Huawei mobile phones. But eagle-eyed Chinese netizens have discovered that he regularly uses an Apple phone. The influence of the movie series Wolf Warriors is so far-reaching and widespread that it has brainwashed the Chinese little pink into believing that the motherland is strong and powerful, and behind them. Especially young international students take it as their responsibility to protect the honor of China under the CCP rule. In their imagination, the US has many enemies, and these enemies are indeed good friends of the CCP. Then, if they quickly show their Chinese passports or even their Huawei cell phones, they can reverse the situation and be released or even protected. So they thought. This is what many Chinese in China and abroad are thinking of the current war in the Middle East, because the CCP's propaganda machine is in full swing, defending and putting in a good word for its good friend.
How ignorant people in China are.
Israel has the right to establish a state. Palestine has the right to establish a state as well. The subsistence of Israelis has been guaranteed, but who is going to care about the subsistence of the Palestinians? What the Chinese have seen on TV is virtually all one-sided information like this.
Like, I don't know. I couldn't make a comment about the war in the Middle East.
These two Chinese workers in Israel
It's a
who were enough
multi-layered
to be shot
issue.
once were shot a second time by the good friend of the CCP for declaring that they were Chinese. After being shot twice, they were lying in a suspected hospital bed with IVs, recounting their unfortunate ordeal. On the morning of October 7th, we encountered Hamas militants and our identification as Chinese was ignored.
Of course they
As
will.
soon as the militants got out of the vehicle, they started shooting. They couldn't understand us even if you tried to explain. They opened fire and we had to get down on the ground
Of
so they could
course,
see
they're
our
terrorists.
hands
The
up.
fuck?
They didn't care who you were, they just opened fire.
Exactly.
I was shot twice and was rescued by an Israeli emergency helicopter. The other two Chinese workers who were with us are still missing. For Little Pink, the Iron Fist struck the Chinese werewolves hard in the face this time. Werewolves are the biggest lie has become the most popular realization among Chinese students in Israel. As Israel is about to launch a major counterattack on Gaza, governments around the world have been taking active steps to evacuate their people since October 13th. Let's take a look at what China did for the Chinese students in Israel. As a Chinese person, I really sympathize with our fellow Chinese students. As we all know, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and war are going on, and we see that the neighboring countries such as Japan, Korea, and so on are evacuating their citizens. But our Chinese students are trapped in Israel. Has the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the Chinese ambassador, the Chinese embassy, and the Chinese government taken any action? Apparently not. This is because recently we have seen on Weibo and other social media platforms like WeChat groups, there are students who want to return to China. They called the embassy but couldn't get through. When they asked questions in the group chat, they were warned by their teachers. We saw an Israeli school where there were Chinese students who might have wanted to seek help, but they didn't get any response. Perhaps the teacher was afraid of the liability. He came out and said, "We students should focus on our studies and don't worry about the state policies. Naturally, the state won't forget us, so let's be patient for a little longer." Some students asked, "How much longer do we have to wait? Other countries have already made arrangements." The teacher responded by saying, "Please be careful when chatting in the group. We are all Chinese. The Chinese embassy is our family in Israel. I hope that students won't complain about their own families because of other people's business, because we are all Chinese." One of the more obedient Chinese students said, "The teacher is right. As long as China hasn't evacuated, it means Israel is safe. The other countries have fled, but China still sticks around. Israel won't be in danger. Believe in the country, believe in the government." The teacher was pleased to
No,
hear
they don't
this.
care about
Such
you.
a clever student, patriotic,
don't.
and loves the party. The teacher replied, "Yes, this student has far sights. Students, think about it. Why has the conflict between Israel and Palestine been going on for many days? Yet, we haven't seen any Hamas in the Israeli city or on the streets. Why haven't you fled? Because we all know that the Chinese embassy is here, and as long as the Chinese embassy is
So
here
stupid.
for a day more, Israel will be safe for
No
a
one-
day more."
no one cares
It
about
was
you.
a really warm answer.
No one
But another
cares.
student
Fucking
asked,
run.
"Teacher, why
No
is
one-
it that after we called the embassy, it immediately hung up?
Man, the
Why did
ignorance,
it
dude.
always fail
It's
at
insane.
critical moments?" Some students added, "The phone couldn't get
So
through
ignorant.
before. Now they simply don't answer it anymore." Other students said, "The embassy phone line is just a setup. I called the embassy and they said that the government..."
They would not care about you. I think I'm done grinding. How long was I grinding? 1 hour. Ah.
didn't have any arrangements yet. If you want to evacuate, you have to figure it out on your own and take responsibility for your own actions. One student remarked, "If your father is an official in China, when you call, the attitude should be different. You can't blame the embassy. You can only blame your father not being a big shot." There was a student in my class whose father was the deputy director of the city's transport bureau. He called the embassy directly from China. The next day, the embassy helped him evacuate. So evacuation is possible, but it depends on who you are. We, the ordinary people, can only wait and see what happens. When the teacher saw this, he came out and said, "Students, please behave yourselves. Your speeches are recorded word for word. Don't think you can talk nonsense when you're in a foreign country. You have to be responsible for what you say online. Don't end up not being able to graduate." So is this to warn or to appease the students? Obviously it's a warning, and it worked, because after that, no more students spoke like that anymore. Instead they said, "We see, thank you for reminding us." Others said, "Yes, we got it, thank you teacher." And another student said, "I know we have a strong motherland behind us. We aren't scared." As usual, Chinese diplomats speak nicely. This is the statement made by the spokesman of the Chinese Foreign Ministry on
Wait,
October
the last
10th.
stole orb,
The Foreign
then I'm going
Ministry
off
and our overseas
inspired.
diplomatic missions have issued emergency safety warnings in view of the current situation in Israel and Palestine, advising Chinese nationals against traveling to Israel and Palestine for the time being. We remind those who are already there to stay on high alert, step up safety precautions, make emergency preparations, and get ready to shelter in place. In case of any emergency, please turn to our embassy in Israel and the Chinese office in Palestine for help in a timely manner. We will provide full assistance to Chinese nationals who would like to leave with their safety being ensured. In fact, the website of the Chinese embassy in Israel hasn't announced any rescue action or arrangement. On October 19th, the Chinese embassy in Israel said that Chinese citizens in Israel should make use of the opportunity of commercial flights that are still in operation to return to China or leave Israel as soon as possible. Those who are in a position to do so may choose to drive themselves and use other means of transportation to leave the country. However, the recent cancellation of mainland airline flights between Israel and China has led to a surge in airfares, making it difficult to buy a ticket. A Chinese girl in Israel reported that a flight from Israel back to China was cancelled by China's Hainan Airlines after the outbreak of the conflict. She and her friend asked the Chinese embassy in Israel for help, but they received a cold response, telling them to find their own way. This sparked outrage among Chinese in Israel and other overseas Chinese netizens. They wrote, "I suspect that the so-called embassy of the communists has secretly evacuated. Don't
They
worry,
don't care
the
about you.
embassy is surely
Fucking run.
coordinating the flight, and the ticket costs 15,000 yuan, which is more than US 2,000. Go home or not." This is the true spirit of cutting leaks, always sharpening their sickles, never letting go of any opportunity. Overseas Chinese embassies often say, "We are unable to help, please find your own way, or don't cause trouble for the country." Wolf Warriors, it's more than a rumor, it's a small part of a systematic brainwashing mechanism. On October 15th, a screenshot of a group chat involving an international group of 292 Chinese students circulated widely on the internet. It showed many students asking the head of the education department at the Chinese embassy whether China was arranging for the evacuation of the overseas Chinese and stating that students from other countries around them were already picked up by the respective countries. They implored, "Even the Indian students already flew out before us." Instead of responding to the question directly, the Chinese embassy official supplied a link to the group with an urgent message reminding citizens in Israel to be on the lookout and take security precautions. Many Chinese students were disappointed by the official response. One student exclaimed, "The Wolf Warriors are the biggest lie ever." Others asked when the Chinese embassy was going to condemn Hamas to ensure Chinese citizens' safety and security in Israel. A Chinese embassy official told the students, "This is a warning for everyone in the group. Don't post any irrelevant information here." On October 19th, the Foreign Ministry of the Republic of China or Taiwan announced it would start the evacuation operation. On October 20th, Taiwan's Minister of Foreign Affairs told the media at the Legislative Yuan that the evacuation charter plane would take off at 5:40 p.m. local time and arrive at the Rome International Airport at 8:25 p.m. Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs had reserved enough seats to accommodate all the Taiwanese, but only a few of them took the flight in the end. With free seats available, the staff contacted several friendly countries during the evacuation process to ask if their embassy staff and nationals needed to catch a flight. Taiwan's foreign ministry highlighted that 35 mainland Chinese had been in contact with the Taiwan representative office in the past, hoping to board the chartered flight. But when the chartered flight was confirmed, the Taiwanese side asked for their passports and related information. They stopped responding to any of the requests. The CCP surely has a way to deal with the students who are complaining. In a WeChat group of Chinese international students, someone posted a video recorded by a Chinese student in Israel, describing her situation in the Israeli city of Jerusalem and claiming that the Chinese embassy and the Chinese Students Association had always been there to reassure us and that Chinese airline flights had remained in service.
Hello, family and everyone. I'm Ame, an international student from China. After yesterday's escalation in the conflict, the most discussed topic in the bomb shelter of the dorm building today is whether to evacuate back to China or not. My Spanish classmate, after checking flight tickets for the whole day yesterday, found out that all the flights to Spain were suspended after many phone calls and inquiries. I have also been keeping an eye on the flight ticket situation and learned that flights to China are still running. I can buy tickets on my cell app. My family and friends are urging me to evacuate Israel as soon as possible. Here, I would like to give you a brief explanation. First, I'm now in Jerusalem, and the distance from here to Israel's Tel Aviv International Airport is about 70 kilometers. Also, at present, transport between the two cities has been completely suspended.
Mega Giants.
Yesterday, air raid sirens.
This is way too sad. I'm not gonna watch this. I think I prefer you playing orcs, to be honest. Kailangan death blow. I mean death blow, 3 billion. I'm gonna need 2 of them. Fuck, dude. Expensive. Wala ako nakuha ni isang drop. May isang distortion drop. Thirty minutes garmot. Okay. Last wave. I'm gonna pull out. Going off. Ito na pag-stream kahapon, oh. Tangin na. Ang bagal ng ano. Ang baba ng bitrate kahapon. May nangyari. Siguro yung PLD, yung ano naman. PLDT. Ay. Ang Garmot Heart. Last wave. Enraged Souls. Oh, shit. Last ko, I swear. I'm done. Wanna go. Wanna take a nap. So tired. So tired. Mm. Oh no. Okay, I'm done.